The year was 1887. In the rugged American West, where endless plains stretched beyond the horizon and dusty railroad tracks connected isolated towns, there stood a small settlement called Red Creek. It wasn't the kind of place that appeared on maps very often. A few wooden buildings lined the main street. A saloon sat at one end of town. A general store stood at the other. And at the center of everything was the railroad station. For the people of Red Creek, the railroad was more than transportation. It was their connection to the rest of the world. Every day, trains arrived carrying supplies, passengers, news, and opportunities. And every day, 17-year-old Ethan Carter watched them come and go. Ethan worked at the station as a clerk and assistant. His father had once been a respected railroad engineer. But 3 years earlier, a tragic accident had taken his life. Since then, Ethan had helped support his mother and younger sister. Life was not easy, but Ethan never complained. He carried a quiet determination that made him seem older than his years. Every evening after work, he would sit on the station platform and watch the sunset behind the distant mountains. He dreamed of adventure. He dreamed of seeing places beyond Red Creek. And deep inside, he hoped that one day something extraordinary would happen. He had no idea that his wish was about to come true. It was a cold evening in October. The wind carried dust across the tracks as the sun slowly disappeared behind the western hills. Inside the station, the telegraph machine clicked steadily. Most people paid little attention to the sound. But not Ethan. He had learned to recognize important messages. Suddenly, the telegraph operator sat upright. His face turned pale. The clicking became faster, more urgent. The operator quickly wrote down the message. Then he stood up. "Ethan," he said quietly, "you need to see this." Ethan walked over. The operator handed him the paper. As Ethan read the message, his eyes widened. The telegram had come from the railroad headquarters in Denver. It contained only a few lines, but those lines would soon change everything. The message read, "Special gold transport train number 47 has failed to arrive at Silver Ridge. Last known position, Black Canyon route. All contact lost." For several seconds, Ethan stared at the paper. Then he looked up. "What does this mean?" The operator swallowed hard. "It means a train carrying gold has disappeared." At first, Ethan thought there had to be some mistake. Trains didn't simply disappear. Not entire trains, not on active railroad tracks, and certainly not trains carrying government gold shipments. Yet over the next few hours, more telegrams arrived. Each one confirmed the same terrifying fact. Train number 47 was gone. No one knew where it was. No one knew what had happened, and no one had heard from the crew. The train had vanished somewhere between Red Creek and Silver Ridge, a stretch of track nearly 100 miles long. News spread quickly. By midnight, the entire town was talking about it. People gathered inside the saloon, whispering theories. Some believed bandits had attacked the train. Others thought there had been a derailment deep inside the mountains. A few even claimed the train had entered one of the abandoned mining tunnels that were rumored to exist beneath the canyon. As the stories grew, so did the mystery. The next morning, railroad officials arrived in Red Creek. They questioned workers, examined maps, reviewed schedules, and organized search parties. Ethan listened carefully to every conversation. One detail caught his attention. The train had been carrying more than gold. According to the officials, there had also been a locked steel box aboard. No one would say what was inside. Whenever someone asked, the officials quickly changed the subject. That secrecy made Ethan curious, very curious, because in his experience, people only hid things when those things were important. 3 days later, search teams returned empty-handed. No wreckage, no bodies, no signs of a robbery, nothing. It was as if train number 47 had simply vanished into thin air. The newspapers across the country began calling it the Lost Gold Train. Rewards were offered. Investigators arrived from distant cities. Yet week after week, no answers appeared. Winter slowly approached. The search efforts began to slow down. Many people accepted that the mystery would never be solved. But Ethan couldn't let it go. Something about the story bothered him. The official explanation made no sense. And the more he thought about it, the more questions he had. One evening, while organizing old records in the station's storage room, Ethan discovered something unusual. Hidden behind a stack of dusty ledgers was an old railroad map. The paper was yellow with age. The corners were torn. Across the map, someone had drawn several markings in red ink. Most of the markings followed known railroad routes. But one line was different. It branched away from the main track near Black Canyon, and it disappeared into the mountains. Ethan frowned. He had never seen that route before. According to official maps, no railroad existed there, yet this map clearly showed a hidden track. At the bottom corner, barely visible beneath years of dust, was a handwritten note. It read, "Emergency route, authorized personnel only." Ethan's heart began to race. Why would a secret railroad line exist? And more importantly, could the lost gold train have traveled along that hidden route? That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. The old map lay across his bedroom table. He studied every inch of it. The secret track led deep into an isolated mountain region few people ever visited. A place filled with abandoned mines, narrow canyons, and dangerous cliffs. The perfect place for something, or someone, to disappear. As midnight approached, Ethan made a decision. If nobody else was willing to continue searching, he would do it himself. He would follow the hidden route. He would uncover the truth. And he would find out what really happened to the lost gold train. What Ethan didn't know was that he wasn't the only person interested in the train. Far away, hidden in the darkness of the mountains, another man was watching. A man with secrets. A man who knew exactly what had happened to train number 47, and he would do anything to keep those secrets buried forever. The next morning, Ethan Carter left Red Creek before sunrise. The town was still asleep. A cold wind drifted through the empty streets as he quietly saddled his horse, Ranger. The old railroad map was folded carefully inside his leather bag. For a moment, he hesitated. If he told people where he was going, they would probably call him foolish. After all, dozens of professional search teams had already failed. Why should a 17-year-old railroad clerk succeed where experienced investigators had not? But Ethan couldn't ignore the feeling in his heart. Something about the secret railroad route was important, and he intended to find out why. As the sun climbed above the horizon, Ethan followed the railroad tracks westward. The journey was slow. The landscape became increasingly rugged. The open plains gave way to rocky hills and narrow valleys. By afternoon, he reached the edge of Black Canyon. The place looked exactly as its name suggested. Dark cliffs rose hundreds of feet into the sky. Massive rock walls cast long shadows across the ground. Even in daylight, the canyon felt unsettling, silent, almost abandoned. Ethan tied Ranger near a stream and climbed onto a rocky ledge. From there, he unfolded the old map. According to the markings, the secret track should have branched away somewhere nearby, but there was no sign of it. Only the main railroad line stretched through the canyon. For several hours, he searched. Nothing. No hidden rails. No clues. No evidence. Just when he was beginning to think the map might be wrong, he noticed something unusual. A patch of ground near the tracks looked different. The soil appeared disturbed, almost as if someone had intentionally covered something. Curious, Ethan knelt and brushed away loose dirt. His heart skipped a beat. Beneath the soil was metal. Railroad steel. He continued digging. Slowly, an entire rail emerged from beneath the dirt. Then another. And another. The secret track was real. Someone had deliberately buried it. Ethan stood silently, staring at the hidden rails. The line curved away from the main route and disappeared into the mountains, exactly as shown on the map. But why hide it? And who had buried it? The questions only deepened the mystery. As evening approached, Ethan followed the concealed track deeper into Black Canyon. The further he traveled, the more isolated the landscape became. The mountains seemed to close around him. No towns, no farms, no signs of civilization. Only endless rock formations and eerie silence. Then he saw something. Fresh horse tracks. They crossed the hidden railway line and continued toward the hills. Ethan crouched down. The tracks couldn't be very old. Maybe a day, perhaps 2. Someone had been here recently. Very recently, and that made him nervous. Because if the secret route was truly abandoned, nobody should have been using it. Darkness arrived quickly. Ethan decided to camp beside a cluster of boulders. He built a small fire and ate a simple meal. The stars overhead were brilliant. Thousands of tiny lights scattered across the sky. Normally, Ethan enjoyed nights like this, but tonight felt different. Tonight, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Several times he looked into the darkness beyond the firelight. Each time he saw nothing. Only shadows. Only silence. Still, the uneasy feeling remained. Around midnight, Ethan awoke suddenly. A sound had disturbed him. At first, he wasn't sure what it was. Then he heard it again. A distant metallic noise. Clang, 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 like metal striking metal. Ethan sat up. The sound echoed faintly through the canyon. He grabbed his lantern and listened carefully. The noise came from somewhere ahead, along the hidden railway line. For several minutes it continued. Then it stopped. Abruptly. The canyon fell silent once more. Ethan remained awake until dawn. Sleep never returned. At first light, he resumed his journey. The hidden track led him through a narrow mountain pass. Around noon, he reached an area unlike anything he had seen before. The canyon suddenly opened into a wide basin surrounded by cliffs. And there, standing in the middle of the basin, was an abandoned mining settlement. Old wooden buildings leaned at strange angles. Broken wagons sat half buried in the dirt. Rusty equipment littered the ground. The place looked deserted. Yet Ethan noticed something strange. One of the buildings had fresh footprints leading toward it. Carefully, he approached. The structure appeared to be an old supply warehouse. Its windows were broken. Its roof partially collapsed. The wooden door hung crookedly on rusty hinges. Ethan pushed it open. The door creaked loudly. Inside, dust covered almost everything. But one object immediately caught his attention. A lantern. A modern lantern, not an old mining lantern. Someone had used it recently. Very recently. His pulse quickened. He moved deeper into the building. Then he froze. Near the back wall lay a piece of cloth. Dark blue cloth. Railroad uniform fabric. Ethan picked it up. There was no doubt. It belonged to one of the crew members from train number 47. The missing train. The lost gold train. For the first time since beginning his search, Ethan had found real evidence. Someone connected to the train had been here, which meant he was finally getting closer to the truth. Then he noticed something else. Scratched into the wooden wall were words, faint, almost invisible, as if someone had carved them in a hurry. Ethan raised his lantern. The message read, "They betrayed us." Below it were additional words, much harder to read. He leaned closer. His heart pounded. The second line said, "The gold never reached its destination." Ethan stepped backward. His mind raced. Who had written this? One of the train crew? A survivor? And who were they? Bandits? Railroad officials? Someone else entirely? The mystery was becoming more dangerous than he had imagined, because now it seemed possible that the train hadn't simply disappeared. Perhaps it had been taken. Perhaps the disappearance had been planned. Suddenly, a loud noise echoed outside. A horse. Someone was approaching. Ethan quickly extinguished his lantern. The warehouse plunged into darkness. Footsteps crunched on gravel. Slow, deliberate, getting closer. Someone stopped just outside the building. For several seconds, there was only silence. Then a deep voice spoke, a voice Ethan had never heard before, and the words sent a chill down his spine. "Looks like we've got another treasure hunter." The warehouse door began to open. The warehouse door slowly creaked open. Sunlight poured through the gap. Ethan stood frozen in the darkness. His heart hammered against his chest. For a moment, he considered running, but there was nowhere to go. The stranger was standing directly in the doorway. A tall man stepped inside. He looked to be in his late 50s. His face was weathered by years of wind and sun. A gray beard covered his jaw. A revolver hung from his belt, and his eyes seemed sharp enough to see straight through a person. The man paused. Then he sighed. "You can come out now, son." Ethan remained silent. The stranger chuckled. "If I wanted to shoot you, I would have done it already." Slowly, Ethan stepped from behind a stack of crates. The old man's expression showed no surprise, almost as if he had expected to find someone there. "Who are you?" Ethan asked. The man studied him carefully. Then his eyes settled on the railroad uniform badge attached to Ethan's coat. "Red Creek Station," he said. "That explains it. You didn't answer my question." The old man nodded. "Name's Samuel Hayes." Ethan had never heard it before, but something about the man's calm confidence suggested he knew exactly where he was and why he was there. Samuel glanced at the piece of uniform cloth in Ethan's hand. "You found that, huh?" Ethan immediately became alert. "You know where it came from?" Samuel didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked to a broken window and looked outside. The abandoned mining town sat silent beneath the afternoon sun. Finally, he spoke. "I know a lot about the lost gold train." Ethan felt a surge of excitement. For weeks, nobody had known anything. And now this stranger was casually admitting knowledge of the greatest mystery in the West. "Tell me what happened," Ethan said. Samuel remained silent. For several long seconds, only the wind could be heard outside. Then he turned. The truth is dangerous. I don't care. You should. Samuel's voice had become serious, because people have died protecting this secret. The old man sat on a wooden crate. Slowly, he removed a small metal flask and took a drink. Then he began speaking. 30 years ago, this mining settlement was full of life. He gestured toward the abandoned buildings. Thousands of people worked here. Mining gold? Samuel nodded. Some of the richest gold veins in the country. Ethan looked around. The place certainly didn't look rich now. It looked dead, forgotten. Samuel continued. Then one day, the mine started collapsing. People were trapped underground. Dozens died. Eventually, everyone left. The town became another ghost town in the west, but not everything underground was abandoned. Ethan leaned forward. What do you mean? Samuel stared toward the mountains. There are tunnels beneath these hills. Hundreds of miles of tunnels, old mining shafts, secret passages, places that don't appear on any map. A chill ran down Ethan's spine. The hidden railroad route, the abandoned mining town, the missing train. For the first time, the pieces were beginning to connect. Samuel stood up. Then he reached into his coat pocket. From inside, he pulled a folded piece of paper. It was old, very old. The edges were worn and stained. He handed it to Ethan. When Ethan unfolded it, his eyes widened. It was a train schedule. Specifically train number 47. The lost gold train. Where did you get this? Ethan asked. Samuel's expression darkened. From a dead man. The words hung heavily in the air. Ethan waited. Samuel continued. He was one of the train crew. I found him 20 years ago, near one of the tunnels. What happened to him? Samuel looked away. He was dying. He'd been shot. Before he died, he told me something. Ethan's pulse quickened. What did he say? Samuel took a deep breath. Then he spoke slowly. He said the train wasn't attacked by bandits. Ethan blinked. What? Samuel nodded. There was no robbery, no ambush, no accident. The old man paused. He said the train crew was betrayed. The exact words carved into the warehouse wall. They betrayed us. Ethan suddenly understood. The message wasn't random. It was connected. Someone had deliberately taken the train. But who? And why? The gold shipment was supposed to reach Denver, Samuel said. But someone wanted it to disappear. Someone powerful. Someone with influence. Ethan's stomach tightened. Railroad executives, government officials, rich businessmen. The possibilities seemed endless. Before Ethan could ask another question, a distant sound echoed across the basin. A gunshot. Both men instantly turned. Then another shot rang out, and another. Samuel's face became pale. That's not good. What is it? Samuel hurried toward the door. We've been found. Outside, a cloud of dust was moving across the far side of the basin. Several riders were approaching. Fast, very fast. Ethan counted at least 6 horses, maybe more. The riders were armed. Even from a distance, rifles could be seen hanging from their saddles. Who are they? Ethan asked. Samuel's expression became grim. The reason I stayed hidden all these years. The old man reached for his revolver. They don't want anyone finding the train. The riders were closing in rapidly. There was no time to escape across open ground. Samuel pointed toward a nearby cliff. Come with me. Without waiting for an answer, he started running. Ethan followed. The 2 men raced through the abandoned settlement. Bullets suddenly cracked through the air. One smashed into a wooden wall nearby. Another struck the ground at Ethan's feet. Dust exploded upward. The riders had begun shooting. Ethan and Samuel reached the base of the cliff. To Ethan's surprise, Samuel grabbed a thick bush and pulled it aside. Behind it was a narrow opening, a tunnel entrance, hidden from view. "Hurry!" Samuel shouted. The two men rushed inside. Moments later, they disappeared into darkness. Behind them, angry voices echoed across the basin. The riders had reached the cliff, but they were too late. Their targets were gone. Inside the tunnel, Ethan lit a lantern. The passage stretched deep underground. Ancient wooden supports lined the walls. The air smelled of dust and stone. The mine seemed endless. Samuel continued moving. "Keep up. Where does this tunnel lead?" Samuel glanced back. "To the place where the mystery began." They walked for nearly an hour. The tunnel twisted through the mountain like a giant maze. Sometimes it widened into massive chambers. Other times it became so narrow they had to squeeze through. Then suddenly, Samuel stopped. Ethan nearly walked into him. "What is it?" he whispered. Samuel raised the lantern. The light revealed something hidden in the darkness ahead. Massive steel wheels, rust-covered machinery, and railroad tracks. Ethan stepped forward. His breath caught in his throat. Slowly, the lantern illuminated more of the darkness. A train car, then another, and another. His eyes widened in disbelief. Deep beneath Black Canyon, hidden inside a forgotten underground chamber, was the lost gold train. The train had been missing for 20 years, and now it sat silently before him, almost untouched, waiting in the darkness, waiting for someone to discover it. But Ethan quickly realized something terrifying. The cargo doors were open, and every gold crate was gone. For several moments, Ethan simply stood there, speechless, frozen. The lantern light flickered across the rusted metal of the train cars. This was it. The lost gold train. The mystery that had haunted the American West for nearly 20 years. The train everyone believed had vanished forever, and now it sat silently beneath a mountain, hidden from the world. Ethan slowly approached the locomotive. Dust covered every surface. Cobwebs hung from the metal handrails. The once powerful engine looked like a sleeping giant. Yet despite its age, something felt strange. The train hadn't crashed. It hadn't derailed. It looked as though it had been driven here intentionally, as though someone had carefully hidden it. Samuel watched Ethan's reaction. I had the same look on my face the first time I found it. Ethan shook his head in disbelief. Why didn't you tell anyone? Samuel's expression darkened. Because the men hunting us would have killed anyone who knew. The old man glanced toward the tunnel behind them. And they still might. Ethan climbed aboard the locomotive. The metal groaned beneath his boots. Inside the engineer's cabin, everything remained almost exactly as it had been 20 years earlier. The controls were covered in dust. Old papers lay scattered across the floor. A broken lantern rested near one of the windows. It felt as though the crew had vanished in the middle of their work. Then Ethan noticed something unusual. Near the engineer's seat, part of the wooden floor looked damaged, as if someone had pried it open. He knelt down, carefully brushing away years of dust. His fingers found a small metal ring hidden between the floorboards. His heart began to race. He pulled. The wooden panel lifted. Beneath it was a hidden compartment, and inside the compartment sat a leather journal. Samuel immediately stepped forward. What is it? Ethan carefully opened the journal. The pages were yellow with age. The handwriting was neat, but hurried. At the top of the first page was a name. Captain William Harper, Chief Engineer, train number 47. The engineer, Ethan whispered. Samuel nodded. Looks like he left us a story. Ethan turned to the first entry. The journal began several days before the train disappeared. At first, the entries were ordinary. Schedules, maintenance notes, weather reports, nothing unusual. But as the pages continued, the tone changed. The writing became nervous, uneasy, almost frightened. One entry read, "Something isn't right. We received new orders today. Orders that bypass normal railroad procedures." Another entry stated, "Several men joined the train at Denver. None of them are railroad employees, yet they carry official authorization papers." Ethan felt a chill. The mystery was finally beginning to reveal itself. He turned another page. The next entry was written in much larger handwriting, as though the engineer had been shaken. "The gold shipment is not the real cargo." Ethan looked up. "What does that mean?" Samuel shook his head. "I don't know." Ethan continued reading. "The steel lockbox is what they truly care about. The armed men never leave it unattended. Whatever is inside, it is more valuable than the gold itself." The underground chamber suddenly felt colder. The gold had been important. Everyone knew that. But according to the engineer, something else had been aboard the train. Something even more valuable. Ethan turned to the final pages. The handwriting became rushed, messy, desperate. The engineer had clearly been writing under extreme pressure. "They've revealed their plan. We are not going to Denver. The train is being diverted. The officials in charge are part of it. The crew knows too much." Ethan swallowed hard. The next line made his blood run cold. "If anyone finds this journal, know the truth. We were betrayed by our own people." The exact same message found in the warehouse. Ethan continued. "The gold will be stolen. The lockbox will disappear. And nobody will ever know what happened." Then came the final entry. The last words Captain Harper ever wrote. "We have entered the tunnel. Gunfire has started. Several crewmen are dead. If this is my final entry, God help whoever uncovers this secret." The journal ended there. No further pages, no explanation, only silence. For several moments, neither Ethan nor Samuel spoke. The truth was becoming clearer. The train had not been attacked by outlaws. It had been hijacked by people connected to the operation itself. People who had authority. People who could manipulate records. People who could erase evidence. Suddenly, Ethan noticed something tucked inside the back cover of the journal. A folded document, carefully hidden. He removed it. When he unfolded the paper, his eyes widened. It was a list of names. Several names had been crossed out. Others remained visible. At the very top was one name circled in red ink. Jonathan Blackwood. "Who is that?" Ethan asked. Samuel's face immediately changed. All color drained from it. For the first time since they met, the old man looked genuinely afraid. "No," he whispered. "You know him?" Samuel slowly nodded. Everyone in the West knew him. He owned railroads. He owned mines. He financed politicians. He was one of the richest men in America. Ethan stared at the paper. A powerful businessman, connected to railroads, connected to mines, connected to government officials. The pieces were fitting together perfectly. "But he died years ago," Ethan said. Samuel looked toward the darkness. Jonathan Blackwood did. Then the old man's voice became even quieter. But his son didn't. Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" Before Samuel could answer, a sudden sound echoed through the underground chamber. A distant voice. then another. Then the glow of lanterns appeared far down the tunnel. The riders. They had found the entrance, and now they were inside the mine. Samuel immediately extinguished their lantern. Darkness swallowed the chamber. Only the faint light of the approaching pursuers remained. Ethan could hear their footsteps, growing louder, closer, closer. Then one of the men shouted, "Search every tunnel! Find the journal! And find the boy!" Ethan's heart nearly stopped. They weren't just searching for the train. They knew about the journal, which meant the secret of the lost gold train was still being protected, even after all these years. Samuel leaned close and whispered, "Ethan, if they know about the journal, it means the conspiracy never ended." The approaching lantern light grew brighter. The men were only seconds away, and somewhere within the maze of tunnels lay the answer to one final question. Where had the gold gone? And perhaps even more importantly, what was inside the mysterious lockbox that powerful men were willing to kill for? The darkness inside the underground chamber felt alive. Ethan could hear the voices of the approaching men. The glow of their lanterns bounced off the tunnel walls. They were close, very close, and they were hunting him. Samuel grabbed Ethan's arm. "Come on!" Without another word, the old man moved deeper into the mine. Ethan followed. The ancient tunnel twisted sharply to the left, then right, then downward. The deeper they traveled, the colder the air became. Water dripped from the ceiling. Their footsteps echoed endlessly through the darkness. Behind them, the pursuers continued searching. Their voices occasionally drifted through the tunnels. Sometimes they sounded distant, sometimes frighteningly close. The mine had become a giant maze, and one wrong turn could place Ethan directly in their path. After nearly 20 minutes of walking, Samuel stopped beside an old wooden support beam. At first, Ethan saw nothing unusual. Then Samuel pushed against the beam. A section of the wall shifted. Dust fell from the stone. A hidden passage slowly appeared. Ethan stared in amazement. "You knew this was here?" Samuel nodded. "I've spent years exploring these tunnels." The narrow passage led downward. Unlike the main mine, this tunnel seemed deliberately constructed. The walls were smoother. The floor was level. And strangely, there were old railroad tracks running through its center. "Where does this go?" Ethan asked. Samuel looked ahead. To the place nobody was supposed to find. They continued moving. The tunnel gradually widened. Then suddenly, it opened into an enormous underground cavern. Ethan froze. His lantern illuminated something incredible. Rows of wooden crates, hundreds of them, stacked from floor to ceiling. For a moment, Ethan couldn't breathe. The missing gold. It had to be. He rushed toward the nearest crate. The wood had partially rotted with age. Using a metal tool, he pried open the lid. Inside were dozens of gold bars, still shining after 20 years, still untouched. Ethan's eyes widened. The lost gold train's treasure had been here all along, an entire fortune, hidden beneath a mountain. For years, people had searched deserts, rivers, canyons, and forests, yet the gold had never left Black Canyon. Samuel slowly nodded. "They moved it here after taking the train." "Why leave it?" Ethan asked. "Because the gold wasn't the most important thing." Ethan looked up. The old man's answer sent a chill through him. Again, the same mystery, the same question. If not the gold, then what was? Samuel pointed toward the far side of the cavern. There. At the center of the chamber stood a steel vault door. Massive, rust-covered, nearly 10 feet tall. Unlike the gold crates, the vault appeared intentionally protected. Heavy chains hung across its surface, and on the metal door was a faded symbol, a black raven. Samuel's expression darkened. The Blackwood family symbol. Ethan immediately remembered the name from the journal. Jonathan Blackwood, the railroad tycoon. Slowly, the two men approached. The vault door stood slightly open, only a few inches, as though someone had entered long ago and never returned. Ethan pushed. The door groaned. Metal screamed against metal. Dust filled the air. Then the opening widened. The lantern light entered the vault. Inside was not gold, not jewels, not money. Instead, there were shelves filled with documents, thousands of documents, boxes of records, letters, maps, contracts, ledgers. Ethan looked confused. This is what they were protecting? Samuel stepped forward. His face suddenly became pale. He picked up one of the documents, then another, then another. The more he read, the more shocked he appeared. "What is it?" Ethan asked. Samuel slowly looked up. "This isn't about gold." "What do you mean?" The old man held up a document. "These papers prove everything." "Everything?" Samuel nodded. "Bribery, election fraud, illegal land seizures, murder contracts, government corruption." Ethan's eyes widened. The documents contained decades of evidence connecting powerful businessmen, politicians, judges, and railroad executives, some of the most influential people in America. The Blackwood Empire had secretly collected proof against everyone: leverage, protection, power. And if those records became public, entire careers would collapse. Governments could fall. Fortunes could disappear. Suddenly, Ethan understood. The lockbox aboard the train had probably carried part of this evidence. That was why people had died. That was why the train had vanished. And that was why armed men were still hunting them 20 years later. The secret had never lost its value. Then Samuel found something else, a small metal case. Unlike everything around it, this object looked untouched. Its lock had been broken years ago. Carefully, he opened it. Inside was a single envelope. Written on the front were 4 words: "Open only if found." Ethan swallowed hard. Slowly, Samuel opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. The signature at the bottom immediately caught Ethan's attention. Jonathan Blackwood, the man at the center of the mystery. The letter began, "If you are reading this, then my son has failed." Samuel and Ethan exchanged a glance. They continued reading. "I created an empire built on greed. I helped corrupt politicians. I destroyed honest men. And now my own son intends to go further than I ever did." Ethan's heart pounded. The letter revealed something shocking. Years before the train disappeared, Jonathan Blackwood had secretly gathered evidence against his partners. When he realized how dangerous his son had become, he attempted to expose everything. The documents were supposed to be delivered secretly by train number 47, but someone learned about the plan: his son. The train was intercepted. The crew was silenced. The evidence was hidden, and the gold was stolen to make the crime appear like an ordinary robbery. The entire mystery suddenly made sense. Then a voice echoed through the cavern, a voice from the darkness behind them. Slow, calm, dangerous. "Congratulations!" Ethan spun around. Several lanterns illuminated the cavern entrance. Armed men stood there, at least 10 of them. And standing in front of them was a tall man dressed in a black coat. His hair was silver, his eyes cold. Samuel's face immediately hardened. "No." The newcomer smiled. "Hello, Samuel." Ethan looked between them. You know him? Samuel nodded slowly. Then he whispered the words Ethan feared most. That's Victor Blackwood, the son, the final heir of the Blackwood Empire, and the man responsible for protecting the secret for the last 20 years. Victor smiled as he stepped into the light. You've caused me a great deal of trouble. His gaze settled on Ethan. Especially you. Then he raised a revolver and pointed it directly at Ethan. The underground cavern fell silent. Victor Blackwood stood at the entrance, his revolver aimed directly at Ethan. Behind him, armed men spread across the chamber. Their lanterns cast long shadows across the walls. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Only the distant sound of dripping water echoed through the darkness. Victor smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a man who believed he had already won. You've done something very few people have ever managed to do, he said. Ethan swallowed hard. And what's that? Victor took another step forward. You found the truth. Samuel slowly moved beside Ethan. His hand rested near his revolver. Victor noticed. His smile widened. Careful, old friend. Samuel's eyes narrowed. We were never friends. Victor laughed. Perhaps not. Then his expression hardened. But we worked together once. Ethan turned toward Samuel. What does he mean? For several seconds, Samuel remained silent. The look on his face told Ethan everything. There was something Samuel had never revealed. Something important. Finally, the old man sighed. I was there. Ethan frowned. There where? Samuel looked toward the lost gold train. The night it disappeared. The words hit Ethan like a hammer. You were part of it? Samuel lowered his head. Yes. The cavern became silent once again. 20 years earlier, Samuel had been one of the security guards assigned to protect train number 47. He had worked directly under Jonathan Blackwood's organization. At first, he believed he was protecting a routine shipment, but during the journey, he discovered the truth. The train wasn't just carrying gold. It was carrying evidence. Evidence powerful enough to destroy some of the most influential people in America. When I learned what was happening, Samuel said quietly, I tried to stop it. Victor laughed. You failed. Samuel ignored him. The crew fought back. We tried to protect the engineer. We tried to protect the documents. His voice grew heavier, but there were too many of them. Several crew members were killed inside the tunnel. Others were executed after the train reached the underground chamber. Only Samuel managed to escape. For 20 years, he said, I've lived with that failure. Victor slowly clapped. An inspiring story. Then he pointed toward the documents. Unfortunately, it ends tonight. His men began moving forward. Ethan's mind raced. They were trapped, outnumbered, surrounded. There seemed to be no way out. Then something caught his attention. The ancient cavern, the old mining supports, the cracked ceiling. An idea formed, a dangerous idea. Slowly, he whispered to Samuel, How stable is this place? Samuel glanced upward. Then he understood. A faint smile appeared on his face. Not very. Victor frowned. What are you smiling about? Samuel suddenly drew his revolver. Bang! The shot echoed like thunder. But he hadn't aimed at Victor. He had aimed at one of the wooden support beams holding part of the cavern ceiling. Crack! The old timber splintered. Victor's smile vanished. Then another shot rang out. Bang! Another support beam shattered. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then the entire cavern began to shake. Dust exploded from the ceiling. Rocks started falling. The ground trembled violently. Victor's eyes widened. No! Massive chunks of stone crashed into the chamber. His men scattered in panic. Lanterns fell and shattered. Darkness and chaos consumed the cavern. "Run!" Samuel shouted. Ethan grabbed the envelope and several bundles of documents. Then he sprinted beside Samuel. Behind them, the cavern continued collapsing. The hidden vault, the gold, the stolen fortune, everything began disappearing beneath tons of rock. Victor screamed orders, but nobody listened. Everyone was fighting to survive. The mountain itself had become their enemy. Ethan and Samuel raced through the tunnel. The earth shook around them. More rocks crashed down. Several times they nearly fell. Then finally, they saw daylight ahead, the tunnel exit. With one final burst of energy, they dove outside. Seconds later, the entrance collapsed completely. A deafening roar echoed across Black Canyon. Then silence. The mountain had sealed its secrets once again. For several minutes, neither Ethan nor Samuel spoke. Both were exhausted, covered in dust, barely able to breathe. Finally, Ethan looked toward the collapsed tunnel. "What happened to Victor?" Samuel stared at the mountain. "We'll never know." And perhaps that was true. No body was ever found. No evidence confirmed his fate. Some believed he died beneath the collapse. Others claimed he escaped. But one thing was certain. His empire was finished, because Ethan still carried the documents. The truth had survived. Over the following months, the evidence was delivered to federal investigators. Journalists published the story. Court cases followed. Corrupt officials resigned. Business leaders were arrested. Entire political careers collapsed. The scandal became one of the biggest stories in the nation. For the first time in decades, the truth emerged. People finally learned what had happened to train number 47. The lost gold train had never truly vanished. It had been hidden, buried beneath lies, greed, and corruption. And thanks to a young railroad clerk who refused to stop asking questions, the mystery was finally solved. Years later, Ethan often returned to Red Creek Station. The town had changed. The railroad had grown. New generations traveled the tracks. Yet visitors still asked about the famous mystery. And whenever they did, Ethan would smile, because he remembered something most people never understood. The greatest treasure aboard the lost gold train had never been the gold. It had been the truth. And sometimes, the truth is worth more than any fortune. Some legends are born from imagination. Others are born from secrets. And deep beneath the mountains of Black Canyon, where the lost gold train once disappeared, the echoes of that mystery may still remain, waiting for the next curious soul to hear them.